Is that me? Yeah, let me just turn all my...
Good afternoon, LinkedIn. I am Dominic. I run Stream. We are the UK's first iPhone-only multi-camera live stream and event video production company. Since I was given access to LinkedIn Live, just one of a handful in the UK to have access to it, I have been joined by a number of guests on the show that I developed, the LinkedIn Live Daily. On Monday, we had Fran Borman talking about the work she does with Goal 17, sport-led mentoring with Premiership clubs, corporate partners, for the betterment of youth homelessness. On Tuesday, I spoke to Pauline Kwasniak about the power of online networking and her role as chief exec of Turn C. On Wednesday, I spoke to Adam Parry, who is the editor of Event Industry News and director of Event Tech Live. Yesterday, I spoke to Andy Collinson about the WFA and how he uses social media to engage and grow a global audience. And it's all really led up to today. As everyone will know, it is Mental Health Awareness Week. And on Monday or Tuesday earlier this week, I put out a tweet to a guy named Simon Blake OBE, who is the Deputy Chair of Stonewall and the current Chief Executive of Mental Health First Aid England. And I asked if he would come on this show. And to my absolute delight, he agreed to do so. So I'm going to bring him straight in now and welcome, please, everybody to the show. Mr. Simon Blake, how are you, Simon? Oh, sorry, they would have missed that because I didn't unmute your microphone. Let's try again. Hi, Simon.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well indeed, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Mental Health Awareness Week is going to be a very busy week for anyone in and around the mental health area, and I would imagine you're no exception.
Absolutely, and what a great week it's been for so many conversations happening up and down the country in workplaces. The theme of the week is body image, and there's been some research which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. Real credit to the Mental Health Foundation, who've been running this week since 2001. Yeah. But I've been involved in just enormous numbers of conversations, and the pleasure of seeing people get involved with our Empower Half Hour, which again I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later.
We're going to talk about all of these things in just a moment.
So yeah, it's been a great week.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I think it's probably a good opportunity for you just to perhaps give us a couple of minutes, a bit about your background, who you are, what you do, especially about the two roles that you now hold.
Sure. So my day job is Chief Executive of Mental Health First Aid England, which is a social enterprise. We're a training and campaigning organisation which was established about 10 years ago in England to bring mental health first aid training over from Australia and to run that training here. What mental health first aid training is really about helping people to develop their confidence and understanding of talking about mental health, spotting signs and symptoms of mental ill health, and really addressing stigma in their work, in their personal, in their everyday lives. Yeah. Stonewall is the leading LGBT charity, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender charity, and was set up about 30 years ago when Section 28 was brought into law to campaign against Section 28, but is also now a fierce defender of LGBT rights and equality.
And immediately before both of these roles, you were chief exec of the National Union of Students, correct?
Absolutely. And before that, I was chief executive of Brook, the young people's sexual health charity.
So long time worker in the health sector with a little bit of break where you went and helped students.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm supposed to be an educational psychologist by now, but I took a year out in 1995, and here we are. It's 2019, and
never
it
went
feels like
back.
I blinked and missed it.
I think, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. You've done a whole load of things in the background. You have OBE after your name, and I'd love to talk to you about that. But actually, the main purpose of you being on and why you agreed to come on is to talk about mental health awareness. You've just given us a brief introduction to Mental Health Awareness Week and where it came from. Started by Mental Health Foundation in 2001. At what point did you start to get involved in that, or has it really come about since you took the role with Mental Health First Aid?
Well, specifically, it is since I took the role at Mental Health First Aid England. But actually, my very first job was running a sex education community project in the South Wales Valleys when I was working for the Family Planning Association. And I got involved then, so 23 years ago, in World Mental Health Day plans. I think what was really interesting then was it felt like something unusual, and it felt like something which was talking about other people. And other people, who had mental illness. And I think what's brilliant about coming in and this being my first mental health awareness week in this role is that actually people are recognizing that mental health affects everybody. Mental health is something which impacts on all of us at different times, and our well-being is something that we need to take really, really seriously. And clearly, there are people with serious mental illnesses, there are people with different conditions, but our well-being, our mental well-being is something which affects everybody all of the time.
And I think it's important. It's not just mental health isn't just something that impacts you in your personal life. This is something that that can completely take over in the workplace, in schools. I know you're on Sky News. I think it was on Wednesday. And Sky Sport talking about mental health in sport. It covers all aspects of lives and society.
Absolutely, and the idea that you can leave your life at the door when you go into work, or you can leave your work at the door when you go home is just absolutely not true. And we've worked with Bauer Media and Natasha Devon, a campaigner and activist, to launch a workplace manifesto this week. And that manifesto is really saying, calling on business leaders to stand up and say, we take mental health seriously. We recognise that we need to address it within the workplace in order to ensure we've got happy, healthy, productive, inclusive workplaces. And we will commit to tackling stigma in the workplace. We will create positive environments. And that manifesto is at where'syourheadat.org if you want to, if anybody listening wants to find out more about that. But I think the really, really important bit which you said there is it does impact on all parts of our lives, and that's why we've got to really just take it seriously. We've got to understand stress. We've got to understand how to look after ourselves. We've got to understand the impact of different scenarios on our lives and on our well-being, and just try to tune in. I think it feels to me as though, I guess, sometimes well, I've learned an enormous amount since I started 7 months ago. I think one of the things I've learned is that I have to tune into myself, have to tune into other people. And in order to do that, you do actually have to slow down, and we have to consciously understand what our body's telling us, consciously understanding what other people are telling us in the workplace, in our friendship circles, in our relationships. And of course, people often criticize social media, and I'm not one of the people who sits and says, isn't social media awful? But I do know that digital does impact on the way that we engage with ourselves and our lives. It certainly does mine.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many positive aspects to social media, and actually this very conversation being one of them, the fact that you can engage with people that you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise. There are so many positives, but there are also negatives, and it's learning to step away. It's learning to or eventually learning to switch off. And you and I spoke just the other day about notifications, which I know, well, we'll talk about that briefly now, shall we? I said to you that I turned off all the notifications on my device, and I saw on Twitter this morning you've done the same.
I did. It's one of those things which I've heard people talking about it, and just didn't. I guess I didn't quite know how to do it, and so never got around to it. But actually, it's already made a difference. Because you don't have these notifications coming into your consciousness all of the time. And I've also done it on my emails to make sure that the emails don't slide in from the right hand side when I'm trying to concentrate on something else. And all of that stuff is, our brains are not designed to constantly be waiting for something to ping or pong or slide in. And that's where I think the real danger is, that we don't take note of the fact that we're fight or flight by instinct. And actually, how do we just take time to make sure that we've got the time to switch off and feel protected and re-energize?
That whole notion of the always-on culture, which we've certainly as a country, as a world turned into, and that is partly to do with social media, and also partly to do with the devices that we now use that manage and control everything in our lives. And I said this to you when we spoke in the intro to this conversation the other day, that I'd noticed something on the bottom of your email, which I'm going to put on the screen because we spoke about it, but at the bottom of Simon's email signature, there was a line that really caught my eye when we first spoke. And I will just stick that on the screen now. Oh, let's do that properly. It says, "I have flexibility in the way that I work. I'm sending this message now because it suits my work hours. I don't expect that you will read, respond to, or action this message outside your usual hours." Now, that was the first time I've ever seen something like that. And immediately I put that on my email signature as well. But I think it's really important, both as individuals and as employers, that that sort of message gets communicated across the business and to customers, to clients or associates.
Yeah, absolutely. And I take no credit for doing anything other than what you did, which is spotting it on the end of somebody else's email. It was actually the chair of Stonewall, my friend and colleague Jan Gooding, who had it on the bottom of her email. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing, because actually, I am often on a train at 6 a.m, which is 3 hours before people should start work and can start work. And yet it doesn't make sense for me to not be working then, because I'm awake and I'm lively. But 3 o'clock, when I'm on my way back from that meeting, I may well not be lively. I may well not have the energy. And therefore, that flexibility is really, really important. And I remember in 2006, my first chief exec job at Brook.
Yeah.
And my somebody I'd worked with previously, so had a decent working relationship with, had joined as my deputy.
Yeah.
I went on holiday. On the third day, she said, "Simon, it may be okay for you to send emails, but we all need a break from you as much as you need a break from work." And that sort of resonated with me. This is all part of that you need time down, and other people need time down from us as well. So how do we make sure that we just try and create that downtime? How do we make sure that people don't expect stuff from us? I remember again when, if my boss would send me an email on the Sunday night, I think, oh my God, I've got to respond to it. And of course, that wasn't their intention.
No.
But unless we're active and conscious about the impact of our behaviors and talk about them and are clear about them, as this footer on the email does, it just creates a culture where everybody's on. And I was at a City Mental Health Alliance meeting a while ago, and the conversation about that as people are asking for things on a Friday afternoon, they're asking for it on a Monday morning. That means that there is no working time except people's weekends. But actually, just by saying we can have it on Tuesday morning or getting the call in on Thursday starts creating that space. And if everybody's aware of that, then you start creating the culture change, because that's what we need here.
And I guess that's where the new Where's Your Hat At workplace manifesto ultimately came from. It was a call to employers to take it more seriously and to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. And we work with a range of clients across the private, public and charity sector. And I think those pressures, those in the drivers for speeding up have happened to everybody. And I think now this is us, a conscious effort to say we've got to think about job design. We've got to think about the fact that you can't keep doing, and people can't keep doing more with less. You've got to be thinking about the fact that we need weekends, that actually all of us have lives and they impact on our work, whether that's children, whether that's your children leaving home, whether that's a death in the family, whatever it is. Those are all things where employers and employees by having open, honest conversations in the context of trust, which of course is one of the things which we know from some of the research that we did this week, which I'll just mention in a moment. If people can talk openly about mental health, then we can make allowances, we can make changes. The challenge we've got is that a poll that we did last week, ahead of Mental Health Awareness Week, showed that people are not confident talking about depression or anxiety in the workplace because they fear prejudice, they fear discrimination, they fear that they won't get the next project opportunity or the access to those opportunities. And these are all things that we've heard around maternity leave, around parental leave, around being a woman, around being LGBT, whatever it is. These are all familiar issues which we've just got to tackle in the workplace. The poll showed that people are more comfortable talking about diarrhea with their manager than they would be about depression. That's just it's not a situation that we want to be in. We've got to be able to talk about mental health, because if we don't, then we do everybody a disservice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to take a moment. I'm going to put the Where's Your Head At screen up on the Where's Your Head At webpage up on the screen for everybody. It's at where'syourheadat.org, which I will put the address to on the bottom of the screen also. So this is the website for Where's Your Head At, where you can, as an employee, as an employer, or as an MP, sign up to the manifesto and commit to make changes or pledge to make your workplace or your life just that little bit easier for everybody. So I've put that on the screen for everybody now. So I mean, let me bring us back in here. There we go. We spoke the other day about sorry, I'm having technical problems here. We spoke the other day about not just about the Where's Your Head At manifesto, but then obviously leading on to Empower Half Hour. Now, I think before we move on to that, I've got a video, I've got a couple of videos actually from Mental Health First Aid England. The first is kind of just a generic overview about what Mental Health First Aid England does. I think it's a really good opportunity now to bring that in. So I'll play that, we'll have a talk, and then I've got another one specifically more about mental health first aid in the workplace. So I'll play the first one for you now.
In the salon, I have all sorts of conversations. We're dealing with people one-to-ones all day, every day. We're in a very unique position of trust, so people often open up to us.
It's so important in society to be aware about mental health, because we all have mental health. As a teacher, I've always wanted to help young people, but I've not always known how to do that. That's why I took the Youth Mental Health First Aid course.
Working in the police could be very challenging work. Well, mental health first aid training gives you the knowledge and the skills to signpost someone to get the help that they might need.
In my role as talent leader, I see the amount of pressure that people are under in our high performance culture. I thought it would be a really useful thing for me to do to understand the effects of that pressure on our people.
We're trained on health and safety all the time, and this is the perfect addition to that training.
Mental Health First Aid England offers courses for all industries and specifically focuses on providing initial help for co-workers, families and friends.
The 2-day mental health first aid course gave us the confidence and the ability to react in the correct way when people are talking to you about their mental health.
In the police, it's really helped us to recognise when somebody might be experiencing mental ill health and for us to know what to do next.
The training's personally helped me being able to approach individuals, not just to ask them how their day's going, but to really talk to them and to offer some support.
Just a week after I'd completed the training, a pupil came to me with suicidal feelings. Having done the training, I was in a position to calmly respond to that situation. It's an incredible feeling to know that you've done something to help a young person who's struggling.
Mental
Health
First
Aid
England.
Simon, that's a really good introduction to Mental Health First Aid England. Perhaps you could just tell us a bit about the background when it was started. I know you touched on it right at the beginning, when it was started, and actually what the aims and objectives of the organisation are.
Sure. So mental health first aid as a concept originated in Australia by a trauma nurse, Betty Kitchener. And Scottish government actually then initially brought it over into the UK, and then Department of Health in England took on the programme, and then it was spun out as a community interest company, as I said, about a decade ago.
Yeah.
Our aim is to really shift the culture so that people feel comfortable talking about mental health. You know, ultimately, we exist to improve the mental health of the nation, to improve the mental health and literacy of the nation. But our mission then is to train 1 in 10 of the population in mental health and mental health first aid skills. And the reason for the 1 in 10 is, I don't know if you're familiar with tipping point theory, but Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point theory, that you get enough of the population who are bought into or have a absolutely unshakable belief that mental health is really, really important, that tackling mental health stigma, developing mental health literacy is something you need to do, and that therefore you would have that cultural change which you needed, which that meant that everybody felt able to talk about mental health, everybody was able to get access to help that they needed, So, you know, similarly with the campaign, we've got, we want mental health first aid and physical first aid to have parity, to be equal. That doesn't mean being the same, but having that, it being treated equally. And what people often say is that mental health and physical health are so different. Yes, they are, but they should still have equal status in people's minds, in the attitudes and values towards it, but also in the resources in order to make sure that people are physically well, but also mentally well.
And I flicked through the website. I'll put it up on the screen in just a minute. I had a look through the website yesterday and again this morning, and you have courses aimed specifically for adults, courses aimed specifically for youth. And again, I mean, it's just a really good indication that mental health isn't just a challenge in our personal lives. It's literally across the broad range of society. The courses are, you have several different courses from half day through to 2 days, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And with a specific leaning towards the area that you're working on, or is it a catch-all?
Yeah. So the half-day course is an awareness course. So it's not a first aid course at all. It doesn't have the first aid skills in it. It's really just that basic level of what is it, how does it impact, and what can we do to challenge stigma. It's really focused around a campaign which was run, which is around Take 10, and which is about good conversations, good quality conversations, and that was so popular that we translated it into a half-day course. The 2-day course is the first aider course. Okay. So it is a 2-day course in order to become a mental health first aider, which means that you've got, which is an accredited, a certified course, which is really about having the skills to spot signs and symptoms of mental ill health, to have proper conversations, to refer people to professional help, and also to help them think about self-help and other sources of help. And then the 1-day course, which sort of sits in the middle, is really about a bit more than awareness, but not a first aider. So making sure that people, so if you're a senior manager in an organisation and you want to implement first aiders, you need to understand what it's aiming to do. You need to understand what is going to be required of the organisation. So it really is about developing some skills, but not becoming a mental health first aider.
Now, unlike regular first aid, I think I'm right in saying this, but there's no legislation for organisations that says they have to have a mental health first aider. Is that correct?
There isn't legislation, but what we do have is strengthened health and safety executive guidance, which was published last November, December time, which said that we do really need to take account of mental health and think about risk assessment in relation to that. But actually, the first year of the Where's Your Head At campaign was about trying to get parity in the law. And in January this year, there was a backbench business debate in Parliament where there was overwhelming support for legislation which would put mental health first aid on an equal footing with physical first aid. Now, the Deputy Speaker, who was chairing, if that's what you do as Deputy Speaker, chairing the debate, concluded at the end that those who were there, the ayes had it, so that there was support for that legislation. Now, government has said that they don't believe it's necessary. They got the Thriving at Work standards. I think what is really clear is that there is overwhelming support for change which requires that equity within the law. So I would say it's a matter of when, not if, because we know that the pressure is actually, businesses support it. We had 50 business leaders who wrote to Theresa May in November last year saying, we believe that the law needs to be changed. Now, often what people will say when they're trying to change laws, but the people it impacts don't want that legislative change. But actually what we're seeing is people do. And we know when there's legislation, we know when there are reporting requirements, that's when it gets measured. And that's why this is important. And of course, the people who are out at the front, they don't need legislation because they've recognised the impact on the bottom line. They've recognised the financial cost. They've recognised the human cost. It's the people who are still saying, this doesn't apply to us. This isn't something that's relevant to my employees. I don't have the resources to do it, that we've got to get that legislation and regulation in order to ensure that all employees, wherever they work, get that support they need in order to make sure that mental health is addressed properly in the workplace.
And I think that kind of leads on very nicely as an introduction to the second video that I've got, because regardless of legislation, as you've just said, you have some pretty big hitters in the corporate world that have already adopted this and have taken it on and driven it forward. Just one that I can remember, you've got Siemens, certainly you've got the Wellcome Trust. These aren't small companies, these aren't one-man bands, these are big businesses taking it seriously. So I will actually just take the opportunity to play that second video in. And we will be back in just a couple of minutes.
I didn't realise the amount of issues that there could be surrounding mental health at work. Since the course has taken place, I have had 2 or 3 people come to speak to me about issues that they're having.
We've signed up to Mental Health First Aid. We're training our upper management, we're training our lower management to notice the signs where people are getting stressed, and so that we don't end up with people being tossed on the scrap heap.
It's refreshing to hear that, really refreshing that people are taking it seriously.
45% of all ill health absenteeism is caused by mental health.
At any one time, there's a significant proportion of our employees who are having issues, so if we can be proactive in helping that, then that has benefits to everybody.
Mental Health First Aid England seemed to be a very effective and reputable trainer, and we found that to be the case since we've been using it.
Mental Health First Aid England came to us with a range of options. We decided to go for the 2-day full accredited Mental Health First Aider course.
The training that we received from the mental health first aid instructor, I found it extremely useful and a very powerful tool to actually take into the workplace.
It's important that everybody knows that we are mental health first aiders, so that's communicated through our intranet, through posters at the tea points and through word of mouth as well. I feel that I'm better able to guide friends and support them and signpost them to services and kind of check in that they're okay.
Senior leaders have got to lead by example. Leadership is all about doing the right things. Embracing the subject of mental well-being is one of the right things to do, and it shows good leadership.
We are totally empowered to provide that assistance and support to our workers and to our people.
If you've got people who have a great environment, great personal well-being, then they can be their most productive.
Okay, so as we've just seen, it's a really good overview. It just shows you, it gives a very good indication as to the number of organisations that you've already got engaged with this, and ranging from everything just from probably the awareness days all the way through to the instructor levels. Do you get any sort of statistics or feedback from the organisations about just how much of a benefit this is having to them and their workforce?
Sure, I mean, we get a huge amount, and we've trained people from 20,000 organisations, and as you say, lots of organisations are really big corporate organisations.
Yeah.
And one of them has told us that they've had 5 times more mental health interventions than physical first aid interventions in the last year. I was talking to an agency, a public sector agency, the other day, who was just really, really clear that this is about driving the culture. And so what people will often say is, well, it wasn't a first aid intervention, but I used my first aid skills, which of course, who cares what you call it, as long as people are getting the help and that they need. But I think what we know is that where organisations are really clear about what the first aider is, where organisations are clear about the support that people need at a strategic level in order to deliver the role, that they've got time and space to do so, that there is a network of people that they're connected in, it really, really makes a difference. And actually, what I've been really, really inspired by is people train as mental health first aiders, and then they do far, far, far more than mental health first aid. They become champions and advocates. They take on Mental Health Awareness Week. They make sure that conversations happen all the time. We know that lots of mental health first aiders this week have been organising the Empower half-hour sessions, which are not first aid sessions. They're about building well-being in the workplace, which we know is critical. It's not just about addressing issues when they become a problem. It's actually about trying to create health and create well-being. And it feels to me like that's the biggest single corporate social responsibility that businesses have. And we see so many organisations that are aligned to that agenda, recognising that this is good for business, but also for people, their employees outside of work as well. And that's the impact of good quality training, ambitious, determined, committed people who believe that something has to change.
Yeah. You just mentioned Empower Half Hour. I'm just going to try and get that up on the screen while we're talking. But do you just want to cover off what exactly Empower Half Hour is?
Sure. I mean, it was a campaign specifically designed for this week, but it could apply any particular week of the year. Essentially, it was take a half an hour out and do something with your work colleagues. Spend a bit of time focusing on you. At Mental Health First Aid England, we've had people bringing in their cooking or their treats and things from Tesco's if they weren't good at cooking. We had people going out for a run. We had somebody come and do a lunch and learn session about body image and being non-binary. And there were, so lots of different activities, and those things have happened all across the country in different workplaces, essentially people taking half an hour. Now, my hope is that people will have gone, actually, that was really good. And we want to continue doing that because it helps us in the context of our work. And we know too many people are not taking lunch breaks. So, call it a lunch break, call it Empower Half Hour. The principle is take some time out, look after yourself, do some things, get to know your work colleagues. You spend a third of your working time at work, make it count.
Yeah, I'm just going to put this this particular graphic up on the screen, which I spotted earlier on. It just breaks it down into the various different ways that you can make use of the 30 minutes in Power Half Hour around just get motivated, bonding, sharing, moving, and discovering. There's loads of tips and tricks on there. I will, just while we're talking, let me stick the link to your website, which is for more information on this, go to mhfaengland.org. That's mhfaengland.org, where you can find more information on Empower Half Hour, as well as links to the where'syourheadat.org workplace manifesto, which Simon was talking about just now. And there's loads more information beyond that also. I've been through it several times over in the last couple of days, and you could just keep reading. So go have a look. mhfaengland.org. Simon, I'm going to cover this very briefly because I saw you tweeted about this the other day, and it's continuing to be on the agenda. around the role that media plays in mental health. We've seen just this week that the Jeremy Kyle show has been axed. We've had 2 suicides from previous Love Island contestants. Where does media fit into all of this?
Oh, gosh, this is a PhD dissertation. It's,
isn't it just?
I mean, it clearly, when you talk about some shows, there is a whole question about what preparation, who is going into them and for what purpose, and then what aftercare is available. And I don't know enough about the specifics or any of that to really pass any comment. But like anything, whether it's TV, whether it's a job, whether it's taking people on adventure holidays, you need to understand what the risks and opportunities are, and you need to prepare and plan and make sure that all of that is addressed. Media has changed, hasn't it, beyond the face of all recognition. We remember as a kid waiting for the TV to come back on again after the all-nighter when it wasn't on, or you would just the joy of there being more than 3 channels when Channel 4 came into being. We're in a really different world.
Sadly, I remember that also, but that only shows my age.
Well, the brilliant thing about that is that comes with experience, doesn't it? But
absolutely.
But actually, there's something for everyone, isn't there? And media, is social media, online media, your TV. Raises and addresses all sorts of issues, whether that's EastEnders tackling issues around prejudice and discrimination or addiction, opportunities to start conversations, whether that's about being able to find other people who've got lived experiences similar to you and that you can go onto online forums. So I think, like everything, it's really, really important to recognise that there is good and bad, but people. We have to try to help all of us to use it and not to experience pain as a result of it. It's a massive issue, but I'm not in a good or bad camp. I'm in a there's pros and cons of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Simon, I'm very aware of time. I know you have somewhere else to be this afternoon. I'm just going to take a minute just to put up on the screen a couple of the social media handles that I could find for you and for the Mental Health First Aid England. So first of all, just because we're on LinkedIn, let's throw that one up. So on LinkedIn, they are MHFA England. In fact, it's the same across the board. On Facebook, they are also MHFA England. On Twitter, they are at MHFA England. And then Simon, you personally are on Twitter at Simon A. Blake. Please follow all of the organisations. Please go find them. Please engage with the Where's Your Head Out Workplace Manifesto. Please do something with Empower Half Hour with yourself and with your colleagues. Simon, I'm so grateful. I've said a few times, but I am so grateful for you taking the time to do this. This is a huge experiment for me. I'm one of the first people in the country to have access to it, but it's still an experiment. And you were willing and generous enough with your time to come on and do this in what is already a very busy week. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Everyone loves a good experiment. I do anyway.
Good. I will let you go. Thank you very much. And I will catch up with you very soon.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye. There we go. Mental Health Awareness Week. We couldn't ask for a better guest on this show, and what a great way to wrap up what has been an amazing week for me. I only got access to LinkedIn Live on Wednesday last week. I have said a few times I'm one of the few to have access to it, and really all I wanted to do was give people beyond me the opportunity to talk about things that matter to them, talk about their own businesses, share their stories, and we've been able to do that with Fran talking about Goal 17 and tackling youth homelessness, with Pauline talking about building an online network, with Adam talking about event tech, with Andy talking about global reach and an audience, and then the most important subject of all for me this week is mental health awareness. Thank you very much for watching. Those of you that have engaged, please drop a comment, let us know where you are. Thank you once again to Simon. I will be back on Monday. I can't tell you who the guest is yet because unfortunately Monday isn't confirmed. On Tuesday, I have Nick Mattingly from Switch's Studio, which is the company that provides all of the software that I use to produce video on iPhone. On Wednesday, there's a question mark. Thursday, I have Bob Vyers from Event Mobi. He's the Chief Executive of Event Mobi, one of the leading event apps in the world. And on Friday, I have James Ski from Sales Confidence and SaaS Growth. It's been my pleasure to present LinkedIn Live Daily this week. Thank you to all my guests, especially to Simon today. And I will be back at 2 p.m. on Monday. Thank you very much.